She vanished without a trace, and someone knows why. What the police got was her purse, phone, and car, but not her body. Her husband claimed she walked away, but her family could not believe it at all. In the investigation, the authorities found out about a secret life, a bitter relationship, and a disturbing timeline, raising one chilling question. Was Dee Ann murdered in her own home? Who did this and why? Where is the body? You see, questions are many, but the answers? We need to find out. It was a Sunday, April 25, 2021, when Raquel Bach realized something was off with her mom, Dee Warner. Because Dee, who was always responsive to calls and texts, hadn't answered. Raquel thought that was strange, so she drove over to the family farm to check things out. When she got to the office, she saw Dee's Hummer parked there, but her Cadillac was in the garage. Oddly enough, the fertilizer sprayer, which sat in the barn, was gone. And Raquel's stepdad, Dale Warner, was out using it. Well, that was normal, but the rest, those weren't. So she went to her Uncle Greg and wife Shelley's residence to check for any information about Dee. But there was none at their place either. Her car stood there, but no trace of her. Upon a few further attempts at making calls and SMSs to Dee, she wasn't available. So Raquel and her Aunt Shelley thought about searching Dee's house. And that's when they found a bunch of stuff missing: her makeup bag, curling iron, phone, and even her passport. It was clear Dee had left in a hurry. Zach Bach, Dee's other child, joined the search and started looking through security footage from the farm office, but again, there was nothing. To make things worse, Dee's little daughter, Lena, had stayed with relatives the night before, and Dee still hadn't picked her up. Raquel knew her mom would never just leave Lena behind. By late afternoon, Raquel and her siblings contacted the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office. As a result, a deputy showed up and spoke with Dale, but he hadn't reported Dee missing himself. They checked the body cam footage, and Dale said the last time he saw Dee was the morning before he left for work. He had noticed she was still asleep on the couch around 6 a.m., so he texted her but got no response. He figured she was just still sleeping. Later, when he saw her hairbrush, hairdryer, and makeup bag were gone, he assumed she left on her own. He even told the police he thought Dee might have been using a second phone, one she kept secret, or at least that's what he thought. But you see, it was all pretty strange, and things only got weirder from there. As time went on, no one knew where Dee had gone, and it started to feel like something more sinister had happened. Zach Bach was convinced his mom had been murdered, and he wasn't going to just wait around for answers. In the meantime, Dale was telling the authorities that the night before she vanished, Dee ended up with a migraine that night. Apparently, Dee had been extremely stressed out lately because she was juggling 3 businesses: her trucking company, a farm, and a chemical company. The trucking business was a big deal with 15 employees, and Dee always called it her trucking business. There was a lot of tension there, especially with some of the farmers not respecting her, partly because she was young and a woman. Dale pointed out that Dee and her employees didn't always get along. Dee could be pretty direct, even blunt, which didn't always sit well with people. The Saturday before Dee vanished, she'd texted her assistant, Stephanie Volkley, for advice on how to block a driver who'd quit. That turned out to be the last message anyone had from her. At 4:34 p.m., she asked Stephanie for help with something on the company's Facebook page. 10 minutes later, Stephanie replied asking if Dee had talked to their bookkeeper. Then, a couple of hours later at 7:43 p.m., Stephanie checked in, asking, "How are you?" But Dee never responded after that. Meanwhile, Shelley was really worried, as she thought the pressure was getting to Dee, especially since Dee had been acting a little off in the days leading up to her disappearance. Shelley, along with others, feared that Dee might have been at a breaking point, possibly even thinking about doing something to hurt herself. Dee's family started to get really concerned when they couldn't get a hold of her. But Dale didn't seem too worried at first. He told the cops that when Dee was just upset, she sometimes stayed at other places for the night. He figured she'd eventually come back home even though she took all her bags with her, which made him think maybe someone else had picked her up. The sheriff's office wasn't so sure, though, and started doing interviews and searches that Monday. And by Thursday, 4 days after Dee vanished, they were back on the property. And this time, Dale agreed to talk to the investigators. That's when he mentioned that there had been a fight on Saturday, where Dee accused him of talking behind her back to their employees. Things had escalated, and Dee had been feeling like no one cared about her. But Dale and Dee were not a new couple. They had been together since 2005. both in life and business. Even though they ran a successful operation together, their relationship wasn't exactly full of romance. Dale thought Dee was more drawn to him because of his success than because of any love between them. People who knew them said they were like night and day. Dee was outgoing, loved dancing, and always wanted to travel, while Dale was more about work and didn't really get into those kinds of things. Dale, according to some people, wasn't the easiest to be around. He had a habit of saying things that really hurt Dee, like pointing out her insecurities. Rickle even said that he made Dee feel like she was always having to prove herself to him and others. Eventually, Dee's family found out about her affair, but that didn't exactly shock anyone, considering how rocky her marriage had been. However, the police ruled out her affair partner as a suspect, though, since he'd been out of town when she disappeared. So about a week after Dee vanished, her brother Greg organized a huge search around Dee's place, covering miles of land, but they couldn't find a single clue. Of course, the family's suspicions about Dale started to grow, especially since his story didn't quite add up. He kept telling different versions of what happened to various family members. One minute he was talking about a migraine, the next there was some fight, and then he'd mention how Dee was when he last saw her. But the weirdest part, he told them that Dee had left her wedding ring in his desk, which was totally out of character for her. Greg and the others couldn't believe it. Dee, who loved that ring, wouldn't just leave it behind. If she had planned to leave, they figured she'd have made a bigger deal about it. As the weeks went by, their doubts about Dale only grew. 6 weeks after Dee's disappearance, Greg had enough and finally confronted him. He straight up accused Dale of lying about the whole thing, but despite all their suspicions, there was still no solid evidence connecting him to Dee's disappearance. Then, in October, the Michigan State Police and FBI teamed up with the sheriff's office to search more properties, hoping to find something, anything, that could lead them to Dee. But even with all those resources, they found nothing. No trace of Dee. Nothing. And before we reveal how the case slowly took a turn, please subscribe to the channel for more true crime content like this. We work hard to research the cases and present these stories to you. The authorities were hitting a wall because without a body, there wasn't much they could do to press charges. But fast forward to February 2022. 10 months after Dee disappeared, Shelley was watching the episode of 48 Hours. In the episode, investigator Billy Little said something that stuck in her head. The absence of a body shouldn't keep people from being prosecuted if they have indeed committed murder. That statement lit something on fire in Shelley, and she immediately told Greg to watch it. After hearing Billy's words, Greg decided he had to reach out to him. He was fed up with how things were going with the investigation. The authorities kept saying they couldn't charge Dale with murder because there was nobody, and Greg wasn't having it. Finally, it was the spring of 2022. Billy Little is a no-nonsense investigator out of Missouri who came out to Lenawee County to have a good long look at this case. His mission, the truth wherever it would take him. So he starts asking questions and learning from Dee's family about his marriage with Dale. Turns out they've been fighting over money for some time. Dee's children told Billy that their mother had often threatened to divorce him, but never followed through because she did not want to split custody of their younger sister, Lena. But something snapped the day before Dee disappeared. She was calm and told her kids that she was finally going to confront Dale that night. She was willing to sell their lucrative trucking firm and finally walk away from this marriage once and for all. It was huge for Dee, like she'd finally hit the breaking point. Greg Hardy suspected that Dale had something to hide, especially in light of the disappearance of Dee. He guessed Dale was just shuffling funds between businesses and feelings that rubbed him the wrong way. So Greg decided to take action by filing civil lawsuit proceedings to attempt to protect Dee's interests and also perhaps get some information about the state of Dale's financial well-being. Greg was pretty sure that something was not right, but in court, Dale claimed that the money transfers were due to following advice coming from professionals in the financial industry. Billy Little, on the other hand, got more and more convinced that Dee was dead. Why? Because there was no sign of her anywhere. No surveillance footage, no phone pings, no messages, nothing. Plus, there were these unclaimed bank accounts and the fact that Dee's phone was missing. And on top of that, she didn't take any of her personal stuff, like her ring. It all just seemed too weird. So Greg and Billy weren't giving up. Greg even posted a billboard with the message, "Help Dale find Dee," sort of sarcastically, hoping something would happen. They also initiated this whole Justice for Dee campaign, and began to theorize that Dee might have been murdered since nobody turned up. Billy was especially suspecting where Dee was. He knew there were a lot of ways a body could be hidden on a farm, and Dale's property, just a few miles from Dee's home, became a key spot of interest. This place had already raised some eyebrows after an old farmhouse on the property burned down in a fire. It was called a controlled burn, but the locals weren't so sure. The police came in for a search right after that, but no one really knew what they had found. Greg and Billy didn't let it rest. The next year, they felt that they should do their own investigation. They flew over the property as well as the surrounding areas in their drones and tried to find any sign of something. They didn't find much, but some points seemed to have a potential. Greg kept hammering at the authorities to check on it more because there were so many areas to search. Finally, in August 2022, Greg and Billy were successful in getting the case transferred to the Michigan State Police. They believed that state police had more resources and experience than the local sheriff's department. Therefore, the case received a fresh look wherein the police interviewed Dale again. This time, Dale said that she had taken money from their business, but they couldn't find any proof she had actually stolen anything. By September, Dee's family decided to file for her legal death declaration so they could pursue a wrongful death lawsuit against Dale. But just when they were waiting for updates on the criminal case, something big happened. And finally, on November 21, 2023, they found out that Dale had been arrested for Dee's murder. Dee's daughter really felt relieved, although Dale insisted that he did not do it and pleaded not guilty. On May 1, 2024, over 3 years since the disappearance of Dee, they started the preliminary hearing on Dale Ann Warner. This was presented before a judge to determine whether the case should be put to trial or not. The prosecution was faced with a rather tough time as there was no physical evidence whatsoever, no dead body, and Dee had only been legally declared dead in civil court. The defense countered that the prosecution had to prove Dee was dead beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution argued that there was no evidence Dee survived beyond April 24, 2021. They still moved forward with the case and had no body. In the months leading up to Dee's disappearance, the prosecutor put much effort into eliminating the notion that Dee had left voluntarily. One such key clue arose when Stephanie Volkley mentioned that Dee possessed another phone. When asked about it, Stephanie confirmed that Dee had asked her to check out phone prices but never ended up buying one. Dee could have gotten it on her own, but Stephanie said Dee wasn't tech-savvy enough to set it up without help. Lead investigator from Michigan State Police went over the searches they did. Things like digging through phone records, healthcare records, social media, and even searching cars. But after 3 years, they still hadn't found a trace of Dee. And then Dee's daughter, Reckle, came in with something interesting. She pointed out some weird tire prints she saw next to the rear of the Warner home on the day her mother went missing. Those tracks approached a side glass door that wasn't seen by security cameras. The prosecutor theorized the tracks might have been left by Dale using a JCB loader, dragging Dee's body away. The loader could fit between 2 pillars near the door, and it might have been parked in a way that blocked the back door. Kind of like what Dale had said about Dee being asleep nearby when he left that morning. Dale had explained the tire tracks in a police interview in 2022, saying he used the loader to get a worksheet from the house, though he couldn't remember the details of that morning. Still, the investigation didn't find any solid proof that Dee had died, or that foul play was involved. On the defense side, they argued that Dale wasn't involved in Dee's disappearance at all. Security footage showed him using the loader at 7 a.m. and texting Dee at 7:45 a.m., saying, "Going to be spraying. Call you later." He was spotted driving a sprayer shortly after and came back around 8:13 a.m. These times were also backed up by sprayer records and reenactment. So the defense also succeeded by pointing out that Dale had cooperated with the police to search his property and gave several interviews where he always denied hurting Dee. They could not find any material evidence to support the assertions of the prosecution, like blood or weapons. However, the prosecution maintained their focus on Dale. They claimed that just because there wasn't direct evidence, it didn't mean there wasn't enough to charge him with murder. The prosecutor insisted that they had met the probable cause standard. As the judge's decision loomed closer, Dee's supporters worried that Dale might walk free. And finally, on June 7, 2024, The judge straight up dismissed some wild claims made by Dale Warner about a secret phone and someone picking up Dee. None of it was backed by any facts. But despite that, the judge still believed there was enough reason to think Dee's death wasn't an accident. It seemed like homicide and most likely Dale was involved. So the court ordered that he stand trial for his wife's murder. Fast forward 2 months to August 2024. This time the investigation finally made a huge breakthrough. The cops found something on a property that Dale and Dee owned. A metal fertilizer tank. But here's the kicker. The tank had a weird weld, one that wasn't from the factory, and it had a "Do Not Fill" sign on it. When they scanned it, guess what? They found a body. It turns out it was none but Dee. They were still unable to detect the cause of her death, but they claimed it to be a homicide. And that's not all. More shocking things followed, and the security footage was unearthed where Dale could be seen messing around near welding equipment on the day Dee went missing. This made the investigators believe that Dee's body wasn't buried, but hidden right above it in the tank. Now, since Dale had an entry to this tank in his farm, it surely didn't look good for him. But Dale's lawyer kept pushing the idea that her client was innocent. Dale's plan in court was to argue that someone else could have put the body in that tank to frame him. Now, his final murder trial is scheduled to begin on September 2nd, 2025. But the whole thing has not been easy for the kids. Lena talked about how much she missed her mother's laughter and the way she made everything better. Rickle, Dee's other daughter who had been through a lot, was sober now and had started a real estate business on her own. She said she gets a lot of her strength from her mom, who always used to be a fighter. The youngest, Zach, had his own thoughts on how tough it was to let her go. When asked about what their mom's legacy would be, Raquel and Zach both agreed that their kids would always remember her, especially as the loving grandmother who should have been there for all those important moments. So tell me, what do you think? Is Dale innocent or really the killer? How did he kill Dee, and why really? Let us know in the comment box below. But you see, while this case is mysterious and tricky, there was barely any touch of violence. However, things are exactly opposite in the case this Hollywood family's darkest hour. This will make your skin crawl to know what really happened here. Watch this video to know about it. And subscribe to this channel for more true crime content. See you soon.